Hi guys. It's the night of the autumn equinox. I've just finished doing my ritual. Haven't really thought at all about what I'm going to say in this video, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about that ritual and what I was up to, or maybe I will, I don't know. Like I say, I haven't thought about it at all, and I'm feeling in a quite a chatty mood, so we'll see how this goes. It's really not that long after ritual at all, so I'm a little bit spacey. And also I've rarely made videos while I'm still in that sort of ritual mode, if you know what I mean. I've sort of closed sacred space and all of that, but I'm still very much in that sort of ritual headspace. I'm sort of moving out of that state of consciousness, I suppose. The autumn equinox feels really different to me this year, actually. And this whole time of year, it's not just this day or even this week, this month has just felt different to me this year than it usually does. And I think for most of my life so far, I've been in the education system, and September has meant kind of a new start, a new academic year. And even though I've actually been out of the academic system now for a couple of years, it was really only last year was the first year actually that I was, fully out of the academic system, and thought I was for forever actually, which now it looks like I mightn't be, but yeah, I guess it still felt, I was still in that mode. I still, only a year previously I'd been finishing up my master's, so I was still in that headspace of sort of counting a year from the equinox, I suppose. The year kind of used to begin and end for me at the equinox, and I've only just realised now, and this is something I journaled about during the week, that today marks 2 years and a day since I really started very seriously practicing my spirituality again. It's 3 years to the day from the first time that I did ritual on a Sabbath for the first time in about a decade. But it's really only been in the last 2 years that I've actually celebrated each of the 8 spokes on the wheel of the year without any gaps, and doing ritual and spiritual practice consistently throughout those 2 years. But weirdly, it was a really big deal for me last year, but weirdly, even though I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, that it was like 2 years, and the autumn equinox always used to have a certain kind of feel to me. It really drew me to ritual, and I would be in a certain kind of headspace. But like I say, this year I've been feeling very different, and I actually forgot that tonight marks that sort of 2-year milestone. Because I've been spending a fair bit of time at my parents' house. I mean, I always have, but because I set up an altar space in my parents' house, it's actually taken me a bit longer to sort of really feel at home with this new altar space that you see in front of you right now. It's taken me a little while to settle into it, and I suppose it was the same with my last altar space, which is behind me, and as you may know, is now sort of a dedicated space to the Morrigan. This time around though, yeah, I feel like I have actually settled into this new routine where I have 2 kind of centres of focus in 2 different parts of the room. I have this altar which is sort of to the north, and then my altar to the Morrigan, and the altar to the Morrigan also sort of focuses on the earth and sort of earth, sky and sea and ancestors and those kind of things, kind of earthly matters. Whereas this altar is much more kind of cosmic in tone. It's much more overarching. So this is my main altar, whereas the other altar is sort of where I see it as a sort of portal, a sort of gateway kind of. But yeah, I feel like I finally kind of got into a flow with that. I know a lot of people can be quite spontaneous with ritual. I mean, ritual by definition should be, the definition of ritual is something that you do the same over and over. And when I mentioned something about doing spontaneous ritual to my boyfriend, he was sort of really kind of confused and basically made that point. I think this varies a lot for different people. I think some people will do the same ritual, will have the same poetry or words of power that they speak each time, and they will do everything in the same order, at least the setting up of ritual anyway, and sort of working at the center of the ritual will be different, but the sort of the setting up of sacred space, the opening of sacred space, and the devotional aspects will be the same. But I know that other people do much more spontaneous ritual, and they kind of just do what they feel like doing in the moment. I've experimented with doing totally spontaneous ritual, but I find that actually having a flow that I'm familiar with is good for me. It really helps me to get into that ritual mindset. If I know what's coming next, if I know what words are coming next, what focus is next, and if I sort of get into a flow that works for me and that leads me nicely from sort of contemplation to contemplation in a way that kind of gets me into the right kind of headspace. And I've found that even like I have a couple of different dedications that I do. I acknowledge kind of earth and sort of elements. I acknowledge the ancestors. I do the cardinal points separately to that, and then I also do a sort of a sort of words of reverence, a dedication sort of to goddess and creation and destruction. And I also have words of dedication and devotion to the Morrigan, which I speak in every ritual as well, which sounds like a lot, and it is quite a lot. I also have little bits of songs that I sing at pretty much all of those points. Yeah, I have pretty much picked up or composed myself little bits of chants to kind of slot in with all of those bits as well, and that works really, really well for me. Song is really, really powerful for me in the ritual space. So basically what I'm trying to say is just that having a consistent flow of ritual is actually important for me, and sometimes I will totally break out of that. I just won't feel like doing that and I will do my own thing, and then at the center of ritual I will spend longer or shorter amount of time often actually doing workings, or you know, I might just meditate, I might do path working, or I might do a form of magical working, though I'm never sure if I really call what I do magic or not. I don't really tend to use the word magic, but for the sake of clarity. So I feel like I hadn't gotten into a flow of ritual since I moved my altar space around, and that it's finally happened. And I think my new altar setup and my sort of sacred space setup in general is actually allowing me to better integrate all the different aspects that I've developed into a coherent flow. I think it works for me that I've got different areas in the room that I move around during ritual, because it was all getting a bit cluttered trying to have everything on one altar, because I do acknowledge so many different things and different, you know, I have so many different ways of addressing cosmos. Anything else I want to say? Yeah, so just on the subject of the autumn equinox feeling a bit odd for me this year. Yeah, it just doesn't really feel... I mean, the weather is quite autumny. It's been quite warm and sunny, but obviously the leaves have been dropping and everything, and it definitely feels like autumn outside. It's just... Yeah, I think I've gotten into the habit of expecting myself to feel a certain way, to feel a newness and a fresh start at this time. But realistically, there isn't much, there's nothing in the way of major changes happening in my, you know, in my external life at the moment. And maybe that's why I'm not feeling that sort of trigger of need for release and this kind of thing. I did actually do release work in ritual tonight, but it wasn't the kind of release work that I would ordinarily do. You know, ordinarily I would have like journaled beforehand, and I've done a lot of autumn equinox rituals, by the way. There's something about this Sabbath, as I said, that draws me to it, and even in years when I really only celebrated, you know, 1 or 2 days, the autumn equinox has been one that I have frequently celebrated for one reason or another. And yeah, generally I will sort of have journaled beforehand and thought about what I want to release, what I want to let go of, and it's all has this particular kind of feel to it. But this year what I actually was doing, and I feel completely comfortable sharing this, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it a tiny bit. I've actually been releasing a sort of spell. There was this spell that I had kind of forgotten about, that a working that I did a long time ago. I mean, a long time ago, like a year ago, maybe 9 months to a year ago. I can't exactly remember how long. I think it might have been about a year ago. And I had sort of forgotten about it afterwards, because I think after a while I did feel it was the kind of working that I was planning to kind of come back to and renew over and over. And I wasn't thinking of it as such at the time, but essentially it was a bit of a binding. And it was just me dealing with my own emotions in a way that at the time I thought was really healthy and really proactive, but in retrospect was actually quite unhealthy and I was really kind of trying to suppress certain parts of myself, and I really didn't see it that way at the time. But I was recently doing a bit of shadow work, and my shadow work journal is quite sparse. So I was reading over the very few entries that I'd actually done before, and they reminded me that I had done this working. I switched to saying working instead of spell. That sits with me better, actually. I forgot that that's the word I usually use. And it just suddenly struck me that I really needed to release that working. I felt like it was time to release that and to get really serious about going a different direction, I don't know, I've had quite an interesting back and forth when it comes to how I feel about my own emotions and how I feel about the power that those emotions have over me. When I was younger, it was almost like my whole identity was made up out of these emotions. I've always been a very emotional person, quick to anger, quick to joy, would tend to sort of hold grudges, I'm afraid to say, which is something that I'm trying to work on, being better at forgiveness and releasing and that kind of thing. But I've always been a sort of fiery kind of person with a fiery temper, and when I love hard, and that kind of thing. But then as I got older, I discovered that this aspect of myself it was quite problematic when I got into my first relationship, which I think anybody who has a similar kind of range of emotion, particularly with a temper. Now, the temper wasn't my issue actually in my relationship, which I was relieved about, because I always wondered if I would actually be a very sort of tempestuous person to go out with. The way it kind of escaped from me was more in being just very upset and crying a lot and getting upset about things a lot, which was in a way possibly less destructive. It seemed less destructive on the outset, so I probably didn't deal with it as soon as I should have, but ultimately it was very destructive. But it led to me blaming myself for an awful lot of things that went wrong with that relationship, which in retrospect was absolutely not my fault at all, of course. And essentially, I think I started a campaign from that point forward of trying to suppress and really sit on my emotions and try to control them, and feeling like not being proud of them, I suppose. And as I grew older as well, I have a very different understanding about love and what it is, and the emotional spectrum and where it comes from and what it means, and what very intense emotions of falling in love and being attracted to people actually mean, and how much meaning they actually have. A lot has changed in my own mind about that. A lot of the idealistic notions that I had when I was younger, when I was a teenager, have really changed. And I'm not sure if that's kind of an inevitable change, or if it's as a result of the sort of shift that I had in terms of how I feel about my own emotional intensity. But this is something that, like I say, nearly a year ago now, I started to think about, and I started to realise about 9 months ago that actually I had been really suppressing my emotions to an unhealthy degree, and that it wasn't really a case that I was just dealing with negative patterns or destructive patterns or anything. And I think that was the problem. I started to equate destructive patterns with the emotions themselves, and I think that was where I kind of went wrong. So I'm kind of getting to a point now, I've broken those negative patterns, but I feel like I've lost a lot in the process, and I could have gone about it in a much more nurturing kind of way, that I could have gone about it in a way that would have retained a lot more of my own personal identity. and my own personal agency and my personal power. I feel now like I actually sacrificed a lot of that in order to suppress those patterns and beat those patterns and cycles, those negative cycles out of me. So yeah, this is all getting very convoluted, but I think I'll probably leave it there for the moment. But as you may be able to tell, yeah, I'm in a slightly different mood tonight than I usually am on days of the Sabbaths. I feel like I'm going through, well, I always say this, like every Sabbath, I say like, oh, I feel like I'm going through a really major shift right now. That's another realization I kind of had tonight, is that like I have been going through major fluctuations and major flux just pretty much constantly for my whole life, and I'm starting to realize that life is flux and change, and it's time for me to really start embracing that and to start finding the stillness and peace within that flow, within that change, and stop fighting against it. I've sort of told myself for a long time that once I get to a point of stillness, that, you know, all these raging emotions and all these negative aspects of myself will all just settle down, and I'll be happier, and I'll be this, and I'll be that. And it's sort of, even though I kind of consciously and logically knew it before, it's really only hitting me now on a deeper level, that the truth that, you know, we're always in change. Everything is always changing. We're changing. Everyone around us is changing. Life is changing. Our situation is changing. And that's what life is. It's a very short space of time of constant change. And until I make peace with that entirely, I won't be at peace with myself. Hello, so I've just done my morning meditation. It's about an hour after sunrise, I think. Yeah, that'd be about right. I didn't have to think about making an effort to get up at sunrise this time around, because sunrise is finally sort of nearly caught up with my waking time in the morning. So yeah, for the darker part of the year, well, actually at 7 the clocks will just have gone. Oh, for some reason I always have a block about it. The clocks will have gone back, right? They go back? Yeah. Spring forward, fall back, yes. When the clocks go back, of course, dawn will be earlier again, so I'm not quite sure I can't remember right now what time dawn tends to be at, or will be at, for Samhain. Anyway, I'm rambling. Yeah, so I just did my usual morning meditation. Does anybody else have a problem with meditating in the morning? I have found, and this has gotten worse in the last couple of weeks, I find it really, really difficult to meditate in the morning. And the annoying thing is that my primary meditation time is first thing in the morning. And I don't know, I've been thinking that maybe I should try doing something a little bit more active, that I should try go back to setting intentions and that kind of thing in the early morning. I think part of the problem is when I'm here in my apartment, there's an awful lot of noise around me, and people crashing around upstairs and people galloping down the stairs outside and slamming the front door and that kind of thing. And there's just a constant stream of people heading out to work, and they're all in a rush and they're all making quite a lot of noise. I think that really doesn't help. But also I just find myself just constantly falling back into thinking about the day and what I'm going to be doing. I find it very, very difficult to find that place of stillness and quiet and concentration on the breath. So yeah, I've been thinking that maybe I'll go back to doing something a little bit more active. But at the same time, I find that if I don't I really like to do a good solid chunk of meditation on the breath every day. And I find that if I don't get that time in the morning, there's a good chance that I won't actually have the time or the opportunity later on, especially if it's a day that I'm actually going into my workplace. And then if I'm meeting my boyfriend after work or going over to his place or whatever, I will often just not really find the opportunity, especially to do a really concentrated and longer kind of meditation. You know, I might catch a few minutes here or there, but Yeah, so that's kind of been my reasoning for doing this first thing in the morning. Also, every book you read and every website will tell you that, oh, you know, first thing in the morning is the best time to meditate. But yeah, I find that this is like the worst time for me to meditate. So I don't know if anyone else has this problem. And if you do you have a solution? Do you have any tips? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it is. I feel, if anything, like my mind is more crowded in the morning. I'm still thinking, I'm still kind of going back over dreams that I've had, and I'm planning the day and stuff like that. Even a couple of hours later, if I take a break from working and meditate, I actually tend to have better luck with it for some reason. It's odd. It's like when I'm still in that kind of sleepy early morning state that my brain just doesn't want to quieten down. But then maybe it's actually the best time for me to meditate because it's difficult. I don't know. So yeah, nothing particularly special here. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing now during the day. I don't think I'll be doing anything particular to the autumn equinox apart from going to the botanical gardens later, like I mentioned. I'll be going for a run in a while, I think. It looked for a while there like we were going to have a really clear day, but it's clouded over now. So yeah, if I get the time to go for a walk, I might bring you with me. But honestly, between the run and the various bits and pieces that I need to do before we head out in the afternoon, I mightn't get a chance. But yeah, I'm going to bring my camera with me, so yeah, we'll see what kind of, if I manage to get some photographs or even a bit of video in. I'm hoping that it'll be nice weather later for going over there.